Family, it's been a while. Not because I forgot you, but because life was speaking and God was shaping something in silence. There are seasons when you don't hear a voice, not because nothing is happening, but because something important is being prepared. I missed you. I missed this family. And today I didn't just come back with a video, I came back with a message, a word, and a reminder that God is still faithful. If you stayed, if you returned, or if you just found this channel today, welcome. You are not here by accident. Let's begin. Mr. and Mrs. Alade lived in a small house at the edge of a quiet village. Their home stood close to the old graveyard, a place that most people avoided once the sun went down. The graves stretched like sleeping mounds, covered with tall grasses and scattered trees. At night, strange winds often whistled through, and villagers whispered that the dead sometimes walked there. The Alade were not poor, but they were not rich either. Mr. Alade worked as a carpenter, and his wife sold palm oil and vegetables in the market. In the daytime, life seemed normal. The sound of goats, chickens, and children filled the air. But when night came, fear crept into their hearts. They would lock their doors tightly, shut the wooden windows, and whisper prayers. Their only child, Adebisi, was different. While his parents hid in fear, he often cried restlessly at night. His little body would twist on the mat as if something was disturbing him. Sometimes he laughed in his sleep, other times he screamed. His parents thought ghosts were troubling him, but they were too afraid to step outside. In the village, men usually wore loose cotton wrappers around their waists and short-sleeved shirts made from Ankara fabric. The women tied wrappers from their chests down to their legs, with another cloth wrapped neatly around their heads. On market days, the colors shone brightly: red, yellow, and blue patterns mixed together like painted cloth. But at home, people wore simpler clothes, faded with use. Whenever Adebisi's cries echoed, neighbors sometimes passed by and shook their heads. They whispered that living so close to the graveyard was dangerous, especially with a child. But Mr. and Mrs. Alade were stubborn. They had inherited the land from their ancestors, and leaving it meant leaving their roots. Unlike the villagers, city people who sometimes visited wore modern clothes, shirts, trousers, dresses, and even shoes polished until they shone. Whenever such visitors passed through, children would stop and stare at their strange outfits, so different from the simple slippers and bare feet of village folk. Adebisi himself liked to pull at the trousers his uncle once gave him, though it always looked too big on his tiny frame. One evening, the moon rose full and bright, casting silver light on the graveyard stones. Inside the house, Adebisi began crying again. His parents pressed their backs against the wall, frightened. His mother rocked him, humming old lullabies, but he did not stop. He cried as though he wanted something outside, as though unseen hands were calling him. Mr. Alade frowned. This boy will not let us rest. If we stay like this, something bad may happen. His wife looked at him with tired eyes. Then what shall we do? He took a deep breath. Tomorrow we will go and see the soothsayer. Maybe he can tell us why this child is restless. Maybe the spirits want something. That night, as the wind howled across the graveyard, Adebisi finally fell asleep in his mother's arms. His small chest rose and fell gently while his parents stayed awake, listening to the silence, waiting for dawn to break. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Alade carried little Adebisi on his mother's back and walked through the village path. The sun was bright, the air smelled of roasted corn, and the sound of pestles pounding yam echoed from nearby huts. People greeted them politely, but some whispered, pointing at their child. Everyone knew the Alade lived near the graveyard, and many feared that their boy was touched by spirits. They walked until they reached the soothsayer's compound. The compound was wide, with mud walls painted white and decorated with old cowrie shells. At the entrance, a red cloth fluttered in the breeze. Inside, they found the soothsayer sitting on a mat, his body wrapped in a long flowing white robe. Beads hung around his neck, his wrists were covered with cowries, and his eyes were sharp like someone who could see through both men and spirits. Mrs. Alade knelt and greeted him in the respectful village way, clapping her hands softly. Mr. Alade bowed slightly. "Baba, we have come for help. Our child does not rest at night. He cries, he laughs, he screams. We fear he is troubled by ghosts." The soothsayer looked at Adebisi carefully. The boy stared back, calm now, as if he knew this was his place. The soothsayer closed his eyes and shook a calabash filled with cowries, bones, and shells. He chanted words in an ancient tongue. After a while, he spread the items on the floor and studied their positions. Finally, he spoke. His voice was deep and strong. "This is not an ordinary child. You call him Adebisi, but he carries another name in the world of spirits. Both the living and the dead walk with him. The reason he cries is because they visit him, they call to him, they care for him." The parents trembled. Mrs. Alade held her chest. "Baba, is this a curse? Will our son die?" The soothsayer shook his head slowly. "No, it is a blessing, though it will not be easy. The boy is a great child. He will grow to be strong, a leader among men. But remember this, he will stay with the side that cares for him the most. If you neglect him, the spirits will claim him. If you love him and guide him, he will bless your house and your name will never be forgotten." The parents exchanged worried looks. Mr. Lade's face was hard, but his wife's eyes softened as she listened. She already knew what her heart had told her many times. This child needed her love more than anything. The soothsayer stood, his robe brushing the ground. He gave them a small gourd tied with red cloth. "Take this. Pour a little water from it into his bath every 7 days. It will calm him, and the spirits will not trouble him too much." When they left the soothsayer's compound, villagers stared at them again. Some people wore wrappers and short tunics, while others, who had just returned from the nearby city, wore shirts and trousers, looking proud in their polished shoes. But no one looked as proud as Mrs. Alade, who carried her child tightly, whispering, "My son, my blessing. I will care for you no matter what." After visiting the soothsayer, life in the Alade household changed. Mr. Alade still feared the graveyard at night, but his wife, Omadala, grew stronger in her heart. She believed the words of the soothsayer. Their child was a gift, not a curse. From that day, she cared for Adebisi with a devotion that never weakened. Every morning, while her husband prepared his carpentry tools and tied his faded wrapper around his waist, Omadala tied Adebisi to her back with a bright cloth. She wore a simple blouse and wrapper, sometimes patterned with ochre designs of red and gold. Around her head, she tied a scarf neatly, as most women in the village did. Though her clothes were not new, she wore them with pride, and people respected her for her neatness. She took Adebisi with her to the market, where the air was full of the smell of smoked fish, palm oil, and spices. Women displayed yams and tomatoes on woven mats, calling out prices in loud voices. Children ran around with bare feet, laughing and carrying small baskets for their mothers. At night, when the graveyard winds howled, Omadala sang lullabies. Adebisi would sometimes laugh in his sleep, his small hands reaching into the air as if touching unseen friends. Other nights, he screamed and thrashed. Omadala would light a small oil lamp, pour water from the soothsayer's gourd into his bath, and whisper, "Peace, my child. The spirits will not harm you. They only want you to remember you are not alone." Mr. Alade was a hard-working man, but his heart was not as strong as his wife's. He often came home tired, dropped his tools by the door, and sat quietly, listening to his son's cries. Sometimes he grumbled, "This boy will bring us trouble. Why can he not sleep like other children?" But Omadala always answered gently, "He is special. We must be patient." When Adebisi turned 4 years old, Omadala decided to perform the ritual the soothsayer had mentioned. It was done in the village square, under a large Irako tree. Elders wore white wrappers and carried staffs, while women tied white cloth around their heads. A small goat was sacrificed, and the child was bathed in water mixed with herbs. The ritual was meant to close his eyes from seeing the dead too clearly, so he could grow up like other children. That evening, Adebisi ran around the compound, his laughter echoing into the night. For the first time in many years, the Alida slept peacefully. Omadala lay beside her son and smiled, thinking, even if he sees the spirits again, I will be here. I will never stop caring for him. As Adebisi grew older, he became a lively and curious boy. He played with other children in the village square, chasing goats, flying paper kites made from old newspapers, and molding figures from clay after the rains. But no matter how normal his days seemed, the nights always reminded him that he was not like other children. His dreams were different. While most children dreamed of food, toys, or games, Adebisi often dreamed of strange people he did not know. In his dreams, tall figures dressed in white wrappers walked beside him, guiding him through thick forests or across wide rivers. Sometimes they spoke to him in soft voices, saying, "Do not fear, we are with you." Other times, they only smiled and touched his head gently. One night, as the moon shone brightly over the graveyard, Adebisi woke up giggling. He quickly pulled his legs under the mat. His mother, Omadala, who was half asleep, asked, "What is it, my son?" Adebisi laughed. "Mama, someone was scratching my feet. I felt fingers tickling me." Omadala looked around the room. The door was locked, the window was closed, and no one was there. She forced a smile and stroked his hair. "It was only a dream, Adebisi. Go back to sleep." But in her heart, she knew the spirits were playing with him. This happened many times. Sometimes he woke up frightened, asking, "Mama, who was singing to me? Who was calling my name?" Omadala would hold him close and whisper, "It is nothing. You are safe." But deep inside, she remembered the soothsayer's words, "Both the living and the dead are with him." By day, Adebisi continued to live like a normal child. He wore shorts and a small shirt his uncle had sewn for him in the city, though the cloth was too big and the sleeves reached past his elbows. His village friends mostly wore wrappers tied around their waists or simple faded clothes, running barefoot on the dusty paths. Yet Adebisi never felt ashamed. He was always cheerful, his bright smile making other children laugh. As he grew, he sometimes asked his mother questions that surprised her. "Mama, when I was 2 years old, why did you carry me to the big tree with the white cloth tied on it?" Or, "Mama, why did you sing that strange song to me when I was a baby?" Each time, Omadala would stare at him in shock. "Adebisi, I never did those things. You were too small to even remember your second year." But Adebisi was sure. The memories were clear, as if someone had shown them to him. Omadala would then grow quiet, wondering if the spirits had been the ones raising her son in ways she could not see. Though frightened, she never stopped caring for him. She told herself, whether living or dead, "Whoever cares for my son, I will not let them take him away from me." When Adebisi turned 18, it was his first Christmas spent fully in the village with both his parents. The village was alive with excitement. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the scent of roasted yams, grilled fish, and sweet pastries filled the air. Children ran in colorful wrappers and shirts, carrying small gifts for friends and neighbors. Even some city visitors had come, wearing shiny shoes, trousers, and dresses that shimmered in the sunlight, creating a sharp contrast with the dusty paths of the village. Adebisi wore a new shirt his mother had sewn from soft Ankara cloth. Its bright green pattern stood out against his dark skin, and he paired it with simple trousers. His mother, Omadala, wore a yellow wrapper with red prints, tying her matching scarf neatly around her head. Mr. Alade wore a faded white shirt and wrapper, his hands rough from years of carpentry. But his eyes were proud as he watched his son move among the villagers. That day, Adebisi was given a gift by his grandfather, a strong, white ram. The boy held it close, laughing as it tried to shake free. He ran around the compound, showing it off to friends and neighbors. But as the sun began to sink, a sudden panic gripped him. The ram was missing. He searched all over the compound, calling its name. The goats and chickens scattered, but there was no sign of the ram. Finally, he remembered the old graveyard nearby. His heart pounded as he ran toward it. There, tied to an old tree, was the missing ram. Its eyes blinked at him calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. Adebisi untied it carefully, whispering, "Don't scare me like that again." He carried it back to the compound, feeling both relief and wonder. That evening, the village gathered for celebration. Women wore bright wrappers with beads around their necks and wrists, while men in Ankara shirts and plain wrappers carried drums, preparing for music and dance. Children sang in a mixture of English and their local tongue, and the city visitors clapped politely, enjoying the lively display. Even Adebisi's grandmother, a powerful woman known for her wisdom, watched him carefully. She sat under a large tree, her wrapper deep blue and her scarf wrapped in the traditional style of her ancestors. As Adebisi ran past her, she whispered to her friends, "That is the child, the one we have watched from the beginning." Adebisi did not understand her words fully. He smiled at her, waving politely, and ran to show his ram to other children. Deep inside, though, a strange feeling tickled his heart. Something about the village, the graveyard, and the spirits that had cared for him since childhood seemed more real than ever. That night, after the celebration, Adebisi lay in bed, stroking the ram's soft coat. He thought about the strange dreams, the giggles from invisible touches, and the stories his mother had told him. The village was full of life and color, yet he knew that unseen forces had always been with him, guiding and protecting him. The next morning, Adebisi woke early, as he always did in the village. Sunlight spilled over the red clay paths, and women were already at the well, carrying clay pots on their heads. Their wrappers shone in bright colors, orange, blue, and green, and their laughter rang through the air as they exchanged greetings. Men in simple white shirts and short wrappers carried farming tools, heading to the fields to check their yams and cassava. Even some city visitors walked by in trousers and polished shoes, marveling at the village's energy. Adebisi ran to greet his grandmother, who lived in a larger compound at the center of the village. She was well respected, known for her wisdom and her knowledge of both living and spiritual matters. Her wrapper was deep purple, and her scarf was tied carefully over her head. She wore a necklace of beads that clicked softly when she moved. Adebisi opened the curtain of her veranda and greeted her politely. His grandmother smiled faintly and whispered to her friends, "This is the child I have been telling you about." Adebisi froze for a moment. He had not expected her to say such a thing in front of everyone. "What do you mean, grandmother?" he asked quietly, feeling a chill. The women around her nodded knowingly, but said nothing. Adebisi waved it off, thinking it was nothing important, yet a small knot of curiosity formed in his chest. Something about the way his grandmother spoke, so quietly but with certainty, made him wonder if there was more to his life than he had been told. Later that day, as they all sat under a large tree sharing cola nuts and palm wine, his grandmother leaned closer to him. Her eyes, sharp and gentle at the same time, studied him carefully. "Adebisi, do you know why your parents have always been so careful with you? Why your mother has never left your side?" He shook his head. "I thought it was because they loved me. Isn't that enough?" She smiled softly. "It is, child, but it is also because you are not an ordinary boy. Spirits have watched over you since birth. Your parents, both living and unseen, have cared for you, even when they appeared busy or distracted. The village knows, and only a few keep the secret. Adebisi felt a shiver run down his spine. He thought about the dreams, the invisible touches, the moments when he laughed or screamed without knowing why. All the strange things he had felt as a child suddenly made sense. The grandmother's friends nodded and smiled, their wrappers rustling softly in the wind. "He is special," one said. "The child is chosen. We have watched him, and now he must learn who he truly is." Adebisi remained quiet, thinking deeply. The village, the graveyard, the ram he found tied to the tree, all of it was connected somehow. He could feel it in his chest, a weight and a warmth at the same time. That evening, he thanked his grandmother silently, though he did not fully understand her words. But he promised himself he would discover the truth, no matter how long it took. And as the village settled for the night, he slept with a sense of wonder, knowing his life was tied to secrets older than the trees themselves. The next morning, Adebisi woke to the sound of drums from the center of the village. The rhythm was steady and commanding, and soon he saw a line of men approaching. They wore bright red and blue wrappers tied neatly around their waists, long shirts made from thick fabric, and beaded necklaces that clinked as they moved. Each carried a long staff in one hand, and their faces were serious and disciplined. Adebisi stopped in his tracks. He had never seen men move like this before. The villagers bowed low as they passed, some even prostrating fully on the dusty ground. Adebisi ran to his grandmother for explanation. "Grandmother, who are these men? Why is everyone bowing?" he asked. She looked at him, her eyes calm and steady. "They are the king's guards, Adebisi. They bow to the king wherever he goes." The boy's heart skipped a beat. "The king? But I don't understand. Who is he looking for?" The guards stopped when they saw him and immediately knelt down, prostrating before Adebisi himself. The staff they carried scraped softly on the ground as they bowed. Adebisi blinked in surprise. He had never been treated this way, not even by his parents. "Why are they bowing to me?" he asked, astonished. His grandmother leaned closer, whispering, "It is a secret only a few can understand. You have a place among the living and the spirits. Only the chiefs and your mother know why. One day, you will understand fully." Adebisi's mind raced. He remembered the dreams, the invisible touches, the ram tied to the tree in the graveyard, and the soothsayer's words. Slowly, it began to make sense. He had always been watched over. But seeing the king's guards bow to him made the feeling stronger. He felt a strange mix of pride and fear. As the guards rose, they looked at his grandmother, who nodded slightly. Then, without another word, they continued toward the palace. The villagers whispered among themselves, their wrappers rustling in the morning breeze. Some city visitors stared in confusion, their polished shoes scuffing the dusty path as they followed silently. After the guards disappeared into the distance, Adebisi's grandmother turned to him. "You must be careful, my child. You are special, but the path ahead is not simple. One day you will need to take your rightful place, but you must be patient. Learn, observe, and grow strong." Adebisi nodded, his small chest swelling with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. For the first time, he realized that his life had a purpose far beyond what he had imagined. He had always felt different, but now he understood that difference carried weight, responsibility, and destiny. That evening, Adebisi lay under the night sky, the sound of crickets filling the air. He looked at the stars, thinking about the kings, chiefs, and spirits that had watched over him. Somewhere deep in his heart, he knew his life was about to change. He would honor the care of his mother, the watchfulness of his grandmother, and the unseen hands that had guided him since birth. The village slept quietly around him, But Adebisi felt awake, alert, and ready to face the journey that lay ahead. A few days after the encounter with the king's guards, Adebisi finally sat down with his mother under the large iroko tree in their compound. The sun was warm, and the wind carried the smell of fresh cassava and roasted maize from nearby kitchens. Women passed by carrying bright wrappers tied around their waists, their scarves fluttering, while children ran barefoot, laughing and chasing small animals. Adebisi could see the contrast with the city people who sometimes visited. Neat trousers, shirts, and shiny shoes that made soft clicking sounds on the village paths. "Mother," Adebisi began softly, "I think I am beginning to understand the spirits, the guards, the strange dreams, but why did you never tell me the truth about my family?" Omotola took a deep breath, her eyes filled with memories. She adjusted her yellow and red ankara wrapper and tucked her scarf neatly under her chin. "Adebisi, there is a reason. When you were born, our kingdom was attacked. Your father, the king, was killed, and I was heavily pregnant with you. The village was in chaos, and I could not risk anyone knowing about you." Adebisi's eyes widened. I'm a prince." She nodded. "Yes, your father was a king, and your mother was the queen. When war came, I hid in the forest, and your grandmother helped me with the delivery. She told me to keep you safe, without revealing your identity. I promised her that I would only have 2 children, a boy and a girl, and then I left the village for some weeks until it was safe to return." The boy's mind raced, remembering all the signs he had seen, the dreams, the ghostly touches, the ram tied at the graveyard, and the king's guards bowing to him. Everything suddenly made sense. "And the spirits, they were protecting me?" "Yes," Omotola said gently. "Even when I could not be there, your parents' spirits and other unseen forces never left you. They guided you, watched over you, and kept you safe until I could perform the ritual to protect you fully. That is why you have always felt special, even when you were frightened or alone." Adebisi took her hands in his. "Mother, I am grateful. You have been a good mother to me, keeping me safe, loving me, and never stopping to care for me. Even when the world seemed dangerous, you were there." Omotola smiled, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I only did what a mother must do. Whether living or dead, I knew you were important. Now you must learn to embrace who you are and the responsibilities that come with it." Nearby, his brother and sister watched quietly. They had always found it difficult to believe the strange stories about Adebisi's childhood. The dreams, the ghostly touches, the soothsayer's words, but now they listened in awe as the truth unfolded. Slowly, they began to understand that Adebisi had always been destined for something greater. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with orange and purple hues, Adebisi knelt by the graveyard, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks to his late parents. The spirits had guided him through childhood, and now he could finally honor them with knowledge, love, and respect. Women walked past in bright wrappers tied at the chest and waist, scarves fluttering in the wind, while children ran barefoot, their laughter echoing among mud huts and palm trees. City visitors, still rare in the village, wore polished shoes, shirts, and dresses. Yet Adebisi realized their world could never compare to the depth of the life he had experienced. "I promise to honor you always." His mother watched him quietly, her yellow and red ankara wrapper gleaming in the sun. She had done all she could to raise him, and now the boy she had protected for years had grown into a young man capable of embracing his destiny. She felt proud, yet humbled. "Adebisi," she said gently, "now you understand why you were different. You have the choice to embrace your heritage, and in doing so, you honor everyone who has cared for you." Even his siblings, who had doubted his stories for years, began to see the truth. His brother adjusted his faded wrapper and whispered, "It's all real. The dreams, the spirits, the king's guards. His sister nodded, wrapping her scarf more tightly around her head as she tried to absorb the reality of their brother's past. Adebisi smiled at them, knowing that belief sometimes needed proof, and proof had now been given. The village elders came to greet him, offering kola nuts and blessing him. They wore white robes and carried staffs, symbols of wisdom and authority. Their eyes were respectful, acknowledging the boy who had always been protected by unseen forces and had now grown into a young man ready to take responsibility. That evening, Adebisi organized a small ceremony in their compound. Women in bright wrappers and men in traditional tunics joined, dancing to the rhythm of drums. He honored his mother, his siblings, and the village elders who had guided and supported him. Years passed, and Adebisi grew into a strong, wise, and respected young man. When he married, it was a grand celebration. Women wore wrappers of gold, red, and blue, some embroidered with beads, while men dressed in long flowing shirts and polished shoes, carrying staffs in ceremonial pride. Adebisi's bride wore a beautiful gown made from fine fabric, her hair wrapped in a colorful scarf, and her hands adorned with intricate henna patterns. The village elders blessed the union with kola nuts and palm wine, their staffs tapping rhythmically on the ground, while children danced around, singing songs of joy. Adebisi's mother, Omotola, stood proudly beside him, her yellow and red ankara wrapper shining in the sunlight. She had raised him through danger, guided him with love, and protected him from unseen forces. His siblings, now grown, stood beside him as well, finally believing in the stories they had once doubted. Even his grandmother watched quietly, a knowing smile on her lips. He whispered a silent prayer of thanks to his late parents, feeling their presence as if they were right there beside him. As years went on, Adebisi ruled wisely and fairly. He honored the traditions of his ancestors, respecting both the elders and the spirits who had guided him. His kingdom flourished, crops were plentiful, disputes were settled peacefully, and the village grew stronger in both culture and spirit. People from nearby towns and even the city came to learn from him, fascinated by the young man who had been raised under both the protection of the living and the unseen. Adebisi never forgot the lessons of his childhood. He cared deeply for his people, protected the weak, and celebrated the unity between city and village ways. Whenever he walked through the market, he saw women in colorful wrappers, men in simple tunics, children playing freely, and he smiled. He remembered that life, with all its mysteries and guidance, had brought him here. And at night, sometimes he would look toward the graveyard near his old home. He felt a gentle presence, the spirits of his parents smiling down on him. Adebisi knew they were proud. He had honored them, embraced his destiny, and risen to become a wise, compassionate leader. The boy who once cried beside the graves had become a king, respected by both the living and the spirits alike.